The other day I was doing spiritual direction with someone, and as we were talking through what the issues were in this person's life, one of the things I came to recognize is that what they were really struggling with was the willingness to be vulnerable. And that's a really hard thing for most of us, if we're honest with ourselves. It's a really hard thing for us to do. To be vulnerable really means to just open ourselves up to whatever might come, and that takes a lot of trust. And it takes a lot of willingness to take on whatever might happen. And I know I've talked before about the fact that I really don't like preaching that much. And as I was discussing this with the other person, it struck me, it really did, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I came to realize one of the real reasons I don't like preaching is because unlike the rest of the Mass, where I'm just essentially doing what the church, what God is calling me to do, and it's clear, in preaching, though I'm trying to do what God's calling me to do, and I work really hard at that, I also have to be very vulnerable. Because good preaching isn't sort of talking at the people, at least from my perspective. Good preaching, you have to be preaching to yourself as well as the other. You have to open up to your own vulnerability. And you have to put that vulnerability out there. And it was as I realized that, it was in that moment that I truly recognized what my issue with preaching is. I don't like being vulnerable to so many people because I'm usually talking about my own problems, my own issues, recognizing that, when I talk about sin, I'm not talking about someone else, I'm talking about myself. When I'm talking about not listening to God in the ways that I should, I'm not talking about someone else, I'm talking about myself. And it's not that in preaching, it's about me. But I have to acknowledge the truth and the reality that the issues I bring up are not just someone else's issues. They really are the issues that most Christians are struggling with, myself included. But there's a deeper truth in that we can only discover who we really are when we're willing to be vulnerable. And most powerfully, we're called to be vulnerable before God. And I think most of us even have trouble doing that. We try to always hold something back, at least, again, I know I have. Somehow I think I can hide things from God. Somehow I think God doesn't see the whole picture. And what I'm really doing is just lying to myself and hiding from myself. Not hiding from God, because God sees everything, sees it better than I do. But when we're willing to be vulnerable, when we're willing to put ourselves out there, yes, there's a chance of getting hurt. It can be painful. Even if we're not getting hurt, it can still be painful. But a willingness to be vulnerable, particularly with God, is where we can really come to discover, what really needs to change in our life and how it needs to change. It's only when we're being vulnerable that we can truly come to see ourselves. Because when we refuse to be vulnerable, we're not just hiding from others, we're usually hiding from ourselves also, Because it's not just we're afraid of what others might see. We're afraid of what we'll see. And so it's easier to put on facades. It's easier to put on those falsehoods that allow ourselves to lie to ourselves as well as lying to others. And quite frankly, we think we're doing the same with God. But God sees through it all. I'll be honest, like everyone else, I don't really always like being vulnerable. But I also recognize if I want to grow in my faith, if I want to grow in my relationship with God, it's the only way it's going to happen. It's hard. It's difficult. But let us learn. Let us begin to really choose to be vulnerable with God. God bless.